Macbeth is a tragic hero because he does have certain admirable qualities such as courage, but he is also a tyrant. One of the things that great writers can do is condense traits in certain characters to create a type that can be recognized in real life. So Shakespeare portrays certain markers of a tyrant in Macbeth that can be seen in tyrants throughout history up to the present day. The first thing is that he is drawn to evil. When he and Banquo first encounter the witches, he is fascinated and transfixed, and he is dismayed when they disappear. Would they had stayed. Why is he drawn to evil? Because it offers him the power of this world. Not the sort of power that is used to serve others and must be relinquished when you can no longer serve, but power for its own sake, with its lure of wealth and status and control. We know this is the kind of power he seeks, because he later tells Lady Macbeth, "For mine own good, all causes shall give way." Contrast Banquo's wariness and suspicion of the witches and their motives. Oftentimes, to win us to our harm, the instruments of darkness tell us truths, win us with honest trifles, to betray us in deepest consequence. Banquo is an honourable man who feels uneasy about Macbeth's conduct, and Macbeth senses this and sees him as a threat. Another marker of a tyrant. He will automatically view good and honest people as enemies and seek to destroy them. As Macbeth says, "Our fears in Banquo stick deep, and in his royalty of nature reigns that which would be feared." He recognizes that Banquo has true royalty, the royalty of nature, while the crown that he has gained through murder is merely the form of royalty, imposed through fear and skullduggery. Just the existence of people like Banquo are a rebuke to tyrants, and so Macbeth has him murdered. But he fails to realize that though people can be killed, truth cannot. So he is haunted by Banquo's ghost, haunted by the spirit of truth that constantly threatens to expose him. Deceit is another marker of the tyrant. Truth is the enemy of tyrants, and thus their response is always to try to smother it with lies. Macbeth lies about his own actions and about the actions of others. He tries to pin the blame for Duncan's murder first onto the guards and then onto Duncan's sons, and puts on a good show of distress about Duncan's death. "Had I but died an hour before this chance, I had lived a blessed time." He lies to the miserable and embittered in order to inflame them to do his dirty work for him. In order to get a couple of thugs to murder Banquo for him, he tells them that it was Banquo, not he, who had oppressed them. "Know that it was he, in the times past, which held you so under fortune, which you thought had been our innocent self." He knows that these are the kinds of people who merely want a target for their hatred, and can easily be persuaded to desperate deeds. As one of them says to Macbeth, "I am one, my liege, whom the vile blows and buffets of the world have so incensed that I am reckless what I do to spite the world." These are the types of people that tyrants need to rely on and who are rewarded for their work. He lies to Malcolm about Macduff in order to divide his enemies and stop them uniting against him. So Malcolm has to test Macduff's integrity before explaining to him that devilish Macbeth by many of these trains hath sought to win me into his power. He and his wife are obliged to constantly wear a mask of deceit. False face must hide what the false heart doth know. But this continual need to weave a web of lies to cover their crimes makes them vulnerable. So there is a tendency to simply hide as much as possible from public view, so no one knows what is going on. Macbeth frequently calls on the darkness to cloak his misdeeds. Stars, hide your fires. Let not light see my black and deep desires. And come, sealing night, scarf up the tender eye of pitiful day, and with thy bloody and invisible hand cancel and tear to pieces that great bond which keeps me pale. Speaking to Banquo's murderers, he shiftily explains that he cannot deal openly with Banquo himself, masking the business from the common eye for sundry weighty reasons. Yet this paranoia of the tyrant that leads him to shield himself from scrutiny, at the same time drives him to implement surveillance on everyone else. Macbeth tells his wife, "There's not a one of them, but in his house I keep a servant feed." In other words, he employs a network of spies to monitor all his nobles and report back to him what they are saying and doing. Yet, ultimately, his continued power depends on a reign of terror as he attempts to destroy all those who might threaten him, projecting his own evil onto others as he calls Banquo a serpent whose son will breed venom. Thus, he creates a morally inverted world that disorients people. As Ross says to Lady Macduff, "I dare not speak much further, but cruel are the times when we are traitors and do not know ourselves, when we hold rumour from what we fear, yet know not what we fear, but float upon a wild and violent sea each way and move." It is inevitable that tyrannies will end up by calling evil good and good evil in order to justify themselves. So the loyal people who love their country are denounced as traitors, and the traitors claim to be patriots. Tyrannies create a population that is fearful, anxious, and oppressed. Tyrants work in darkness and deceit, upturning the settled morality of the people and leaving them destabilized, uncertain of the future, and afraid to speak out against the regime, lest they are targeted and destroyed. There is no rule of law, and even the most intimate space may be violated. Malcolm refers to this as his army approaches Macbeth's castle. "I hope the days are near at hand, that Chambers will be safe." When Macduff, in England, asks Ross how things are in Scotland, Ross describes the misery of the people suffering from the twin evils of lawlessness and oppression. "Alas, poor country, almost afraid to know itself. It cannot be called our mother, but our grave, where nothing but who knows nothing is once seen to smile, where sighs and groans and shrieks that rend the air are made, not marked, where violent sorrow seems a modern ecstasy." Macbeth has created wretchedness on a mass scale, where only the truly ignorant can claim that all is well. But he has also created a crisis of identity. Comparing Scotland to a mother to convey the deep and instinctive love that the people have for their country, Ross says that it now hardly recognizes itself, since the familiar patterns of morality and bonds of trust have been shattered by the tyrant's fist. One of the most natural and vital elements of being human, the ability to express yourself freely, is constrained. As the physician attending on Lady Macbeth says, "I think, but dare not speak." Tyrants hate free speech, but it is that thinking aspect that begins to plague them after a while. For despite the obfuscation, lies, false narratives, intimidation and persecution, they cannot ultimately control people's thoughts. And the pressure of knowing the thoughts of much of the population are turned against you leads to still greater repression to gain greater mastery. Since it is impossible to undo the evil already committed, the tyrant instead intensifies his efforts to cover it up with more control and repression of dissent. I am in blood stepped in so far that, should I wade no more, returning were as tedious as go o'er. As long as there is one person free to oppose him, he feels the fragility of his hold on power. As Macbeth laments when he hears of Fleance's escape from his clutches. Now I am cabined, cribbed, confined, bound in to saucy doubts and fears. As he becomes more desperate, he becomes more vicious, so that when he is trying to force reluctant men to fight for him in his final battle against Malcolm, he instructs, "Hang those that talk of fear." Consumed by his passion for power, he has become numb to evil. I have supped full with horrors. Direness, familiar to my slaughterous thoughts, cannot once start me. The irony for the tyrant, though, is that the respect and stature he so craved in seizing power and grasping onto it are precisely what he never gains, as Macbeth recognizes towards the end. That which should accompany old age, as honour, love, obedience, troops of friends, I must not look to have, but in their stead curses, not loud but deep, mouth honour, breath, which the poor heart would fain deny, and dare not. The promise of the witches is a phantom, a form without substance, a ghastly counterfeit of true kingship. So the destiny of every tyrant is to be hated, reviled, and ultimately ridiculed. As Malcolm's forces gather to confront the beleaguered Macbeth, Angus encapsulates the contemptible fate of the tyrant. Those he commands move only in command, nothing in love. Now does he feel his title hang loose about him, like a giant's robe upon a dwarfish thief.